This is Thank You Mama, weekly lessons from mothers all around the world. Hello and welcome to Thank You Mama. My name is Anna Titer. My guest today is Nayomi Munaweera. Nayomi is the award-winning author of novels Island of a Thousand Mirrors and What Lies Between Us. Nayomi was born in Sri Lanka. She grew up in Nigeria and immigrated to Los Angeles with her family in the early 80s. Island of a Thousand Mirrors won the Commonwealth Book Prize for the Asian region and was shortlisted for the DSC Prize and Men Asia Prizes. It was chosen as a Target Book Club book. All my American listeners will know how important that is. Her second novel, What Lies Between Us, won the Sri Lankan National Book Award and was shortlisted for the Northern California Book Prize. She lives in Oakland, California, and is working on her third novel, a psychosexual literary thriller, which I can't wait to hear about. Hi and welcome.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm really thrilled to be here.
I'm very excited about you being here. We just spoke about it. I read your story in What My Mother and I Don't Talk About, and I was so deeply touched. I really hoped you will say yes to being my guest, and here you are.
Yeah.
Let's start with your work.
Great.
Tell me about your books.
Okay, so Island of a Thousand Mirrors is a book about the civil war in Sri Lanka, which went on from 1983 to 2009. It follows the lives of two women through that conflict, and I was really interested in how women and women's bodies are affected by war. Usually when we think about like war narratives or war novels, it's through the perspective of soldiers. And I really wanted to document what happened in Sri Lanka in those 26 years, which is this like long and brutal civil war. Sri Lanka, as you might know, is this like gorgeous tropical island off the coast of India, the southern coast of India. It is really the most beautiful place. And, you know, we've been ravaged by war and corrupt governments and tsunami. And
I read about 100,000 deaths during that war.
Yes.
How many inhabitants does Sri Lanka have?
There's about 22 million, and a lot of us are in the diaspora because of the war, you know. I'm Sinhalese, so I'm part of the majority ethnicity, and I consider what happened a genocide against Tamil people. So I just want to put that out there and make that clear. Yeah, it is a beautiful place with a complicated history, and yeah.
So it was an ethnic war, similar to what we experienced in Yugoslavia back then.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah.
We in Croatia, not in Croatia, in Bosnia, there were during the war, one of the worst things that happened were systematic rapings. The Serbian soldiers would rape Bosnian women and sometimes impregnate them and hold them hostage. So they give birth to Serbian babies. When you're talking about women and women's bodies and how civil wars or wars affect bodies, did something like this happen in Sri Lanka?
Yeah, it's similar. So what it came down to was the Sinhalese government against the Tamil Tigers. Folks might remember that group, and they started out as a freedom fighting force and then eventually became terrorists. And, you know, my book is about it's about a Sinhalese woman who is going through the war and then immigrates. It's also about a young woman, Tamil woman in the north, and what happens to her when Sinhala soldiers come into her village, which is similar to what you were talking about. So it didn't have the sort of added horror of forced pregnancies, but absolutely rape as a weapon of war, as a sort of, you know, this terrible, torturous device of war. Yes, that happened, and my book is actually partly about that. Yeah, and that's the first book.
What about What Lies Between Us?
What Lies Between Us is told from the perspective of a woman who is in a jail cell, and she has committed a very terrible crime, and she's going to explain to you why she has done this. And it's really an exploration of like childhood abuse and how that affects maternity. And, you know, in all my books, I'm really asking for empathy for folks that is maybe difficult to empathize with, but my sort of challenge to myself is, can I make the reader come away from this feeling like, oh, wow, if I was in those circumstances, okay, maybe I would have done something similar. That sort of questioning about where we can go when things get very, very bad. And the question is like, can I create empathy and ask my readers for empathy? Yeah.
That's an issue we really, really need urgently in the world right now. I think I'm very sad how everybody turned against everybody, and instead of I don't know, trying to unify in protecting the planet and surviving, we are just attacking each other more than ever.
Yeah, you know, I almost feel like it is such a huge taking away of our attention, right? Because when we're talking about mothers, what is more important than the planet is our mother, right? That's the big mother. That is all the huge mother of all of us is the planet. And we've been so our attention is taken away into these other things. And it's like climate change is the only issue, really.
Absolutely.
It's really the only issue.
The only issue we should all be talking about. And that should unite us, because it really unites us. There's no me and you and West and East and I don't know what, North and South. It's like all of us together in this.
All of us together.
And instead of that, we're discussing who's... I don't even know what. I seriously don't even know what anymore.
Oh my God. Yeah, it's true. You know, like, and I want to say the island nations, you know, like the Maldives and Sri Lanka, and these small nations Barbados are the ones that are feeling the effects of climate change, right? That will come to the big Western nations down the line. But this, you know, they are like the front line. And there's a lot of work being done on that, and just really talking about the smaller places are feeling the effects first. Yeah.
Tell me about the third one, if you can. What is a psychosexual literary thriller, please?
It's been, you know, my books are always difficult to write, but it was also fun to write that one. It is about a young woman who is trying to make her way into being a writer, and she's in sort of encounter and conflict and romantic interest with a man who is very dangerous and is an older white man. He's a famous painter. They meet in a hotel where she's a maid and he's painting a giant mural. And he has a terrible, scary secret. So it's really about what happens to a woman when she comes up against patriarchy, right? Like how do you navigate being a young woman when you're faced with sort of a little bit murderous patriarchy. And it's also very, very seductive to us because, you know, you see the sort of way that can be powerful. And it's about her own wounds and how sort of that presses on her. And really it's a question of like who survives and who gets to sort of tell the story.
Very exciting. Let's talk about Mom. I read about Mom, and as I told you, I wanted to reread the story. I made so many notes, and I can't find the copy of my book. So you'll have to forgive me if I forgot certain things. What is her name?
Her name is Upamali. Athuya is her maiden name. And her married name is Upamali Munaweera.
Will you tell me her story?
Yes. Oh, wow. Okay. And I want to preface this by saying, you know, I'm going to talk about Sri Lanka. I'm going to talk about traditions in South Asia that are very patriarchal. And I want to start by also saying, like, patriarchy is not a product of the quote unquote third world, right? Like all women live under it all over the world. And it is, you know, like in America, there's plenty of patriarchy. In Europe, there's plenty of patriarchy. I want to say that first. And then I want to say that is, I think, the force that created my mom and really is something she's been up against her whole life. She was born in Sri Lanka. She's currently 70. She's beautiful. She's like a really gorgeous 70-year-old. She always was. And she had a pretty sheltered life. And then when she was in her teens, her father died. And upon the heels of that, her older brother, who she really loved, died in a car crash. And I think what happened is my oldest aunt, who is 20 years older than my mom, got to have a lot more freedom. She got to choose her partner. She got to go to America and study and get a master's degree. There's a middle aunt, and then my mom is the youngest. And by the time when my mother was in her teens, they had sort of come on hard times because my grandfather had died. And what this meant was an arranged marriage. So my mom was married at 19. She had me at 20. And, I want to say my dad's a good guy from my perspective, right? Like as the daughter, he's a very, very sweet guy. And it was a really messy, difficult, painful marriage as a child. I was in Sri Lanka for 3 years, and then we moved to Nigeria. And we were there till I was 12. And then from there, we went to LA. And what I witnessed was a lot of fighting, a lot of anger, a lot of some domestic abuse. And I'm not like glossing over that. It's folded into the many things. I experienced my mother at that time as very, very angry. It was extremely difficult to sort of empathize and understand her rage.
Did you have a brother or sister, or you were an only child?
I have a younger sister who's 9 years younger than me. So what I experienced was just what I felt was my mother's sort of like uncontrollable rage. So a lot of like throwing of dishes and yelling, and it just didn't feel safe. There was a lot of sort of having to appease her. And being scared, like it was a loud household.
Would your father react to back with rage?
Certain moments, yes. Not continuously, but when he did, it was pretty ugly. And I want to say these things. I don't want to gloss them over, right? Because it was ugly and painful and it was scary. And I was also like protecting my younger sister, who was almost 10 years younger than me. It was a scary place to grow up in. We didn't know how the mood would change. So sometimes she would be really sweet and lovely, and then other times she would just be rageful, and it would switch. And we got really good at being able to tell her mood. And there was a lot of back and forth. There would be, like times where they didn't talk, and then times when they were really loving. And then times where later she left a couple of times, and that was great. My sister and I were really happy about that. But then she would go back, and it just was very unstable.
Did she have a profession, or was she a stay?
Oh yeah, she's no. She's incredibly talented. She dropped out of school basically to get married, and what she had was just a certificate in Montessori training from Sri Lanka. And she took that, and in Africa, she became a teacher. She became a headmistress of a school, which is so just incredible. She had a TV show for kids about art. And, this is a complicated woman, right? This is a really talented woman. She came to America, and she started off working in a classroom at my aunt's Montessori, and then eventually worked herself up to like owning schools. Like she owned preschools, incredibly successful, bought herself a house. Just, I cannot stress to you enough the sort of self-madeness, that she was just really, as much as it was complicated at home, she was also incredibly successful. And in this way that is astonishing for someone who didn't have the privilege of education. She just really made a big life for herself.
What about your father? Was he equally successful? Was she more successful?
Yeah.
Yes.
No, equally successful. Like my dad's story also is like, he's 80 now. So he grew up in a small village, and he talks about like not having, when a motorcycle came into the village for the first time when he was about 12, that was a scary experience because they didn't know, right? But then he became an engineer. He went to the best university in Sri Lanka, trained as an engineer, went to Africa, was in charge of building all kinds of things, came to America, again, started from the very bottom. He got a job at the LA County. His first job in America was being a parking lot attendant. Okay. This like very qualified engineer. And then he got a job as at the very bottom rungs of the LA County. And, his first job there was crawling through flood control channels on a little pulley with wheels on it, sort of checking for blocks. And he talks about encountering spiders and just like scary stuff, right? And he rises through the ranks, and he eventually becomes the engineer in charge of all the LA freeway system.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which is the biggest freeway system in the world and is
the craziest.
And the craziest. And, he was in charge of that. Like his education and his sort of self-made intelligence, coming out of these very small places, they were very, very successful. They are the immigrant success story. And I think that's also part of it for South Asians. Like we are so successful in America, right? We are the most financially successful immigrants in America. And then the hidden story is we're bringing a lot of the secret sort of pain of arranged marriage and folks that didn't know each other. And also like the generations of arranged marriage. My grandmother had arranged marriage. She was 12. And then going back, every woman in my lineage, right? So there is this sort of generational pain of not having a choice around who you love. It goes back and it goes back and it goes back. And it's also like societally sanctioned. So it is sanctioned to give your girl away to an older man who, is also playing this societal role.
Yeah. Yep. How old was your dad when they got married? She was 19.
He was 29, which is very normal. It's and 15-year age difference is very normal. Was very normal.
So what is she doing now? Did she retire? Is she still...
Yeah. So she's retired, and she's hanging out with my sister who has two beautiful daughters and is just really like this wonderful, wonderful grandmother. And so is my dad. They're really, really good grandparents. And my story with my mom is really interesting because the essay that you read, which is really about the most difficult parts of growing up with her, just really feeling the brunt of age, was my first opening into telling the story. So there was a lot of pressure to not tell the story, not even necessarily from my parents, but more just, I don't know, what will people think? What will the community think? We're immigrants. We're part of a like immigrant community. That's their community. What will they think? So I really thought that I would never tell the story of what happened in my childhood till like my parents had passed away. And then the editor of that book, What My Mother and I Will Not Talk About, contacted me and said, would you write for this? And I thought, oh God, okay, here it is, right? And I said yes, because I'm like, okay, there are 14 other writers. I'll be safe to say it this way. And I've written a lot of things. That was probably the hardest thing I ever wrote. Just really going into the pain of it and pulling it out and looking at it. And I wrote it several drafts over and over. It was really, really hard. And at the end of it, I thought, oh my God, I have to send it to my mom, right? Like I've exposed all these secrets. I can't just send it into the world and not give her some input because I'm the writer. So I get to tell the story like she doesn't, right? And there's a sort of implicit power differential in that. So I sent it to her and there was silence for a while and I was so scared. And for a while I was like, oh my God, maybe it's too much. I'll retract it. Maybe this, maybe she can't hold it. And then right before I did that, she wrote, and it was a very simple text. It was like, I love you and I understand and you should tell the story. And I ended my essay with that.
I remember.
Yeah. And it was just a huge opening. It was such a huge like, oh, okay, she feels okay with me telling this story. So that was number one, the first step, and then putting it out into the world. And, I can't imagine that was easy for her. I'm sure that was really hard for her to have that story out in the world and to have people reading it. And we haven't really talked about what the impact of that has been for her. And then I want to talk about a second experience, which is going to get a little strange. Is that all right?
Yeah, please do.
Okay. So I hope people bear with me as I talk about this, because it is a somewhat spiritual and strange event that happened. And this is the next part of my healing with my mother. 5 years ago, I'm extremely estranged from my parents. I have barely talked to them. I have just gone into this place of like, wow, it is too unstable. At that point, they had separated and gotten back together and separated and gotten back together. And there's just a lot of chaos, some domestic violence. Again, I'm not getting into the details, but just understand that it was quite bad. And for those reasons, I had said, this is not changing. And I have begged and begged for you guys to change. I begged you to go to therapy. I begged you to like maybe learn meditation or just anything. And like none of this has worked. So now I have to separate myself. And so I had made this conscious decision to separate myself. What I then did is like completely unrelated to anything about my mother, I went and drank ayahuasca. And I don't know if people, do you know?
I do, yes. Maybe we should explain it for those who don't.
Absolutely. So ayahuasca is medicine from Peru. It's been used by indigenous people in Peru for millennia. They've found evidence of it in a shaman's bag like 1,000 years ago. And what it is a medicine that connects you to what I think is the spirit of the planet, which is maternal. And I know I sound extremely woo-woo, but this was my experience. And before I drank the medicine, I absolutely would have been like, that's crazy, that's not real. And then I sat with people in ceremony led by a healer and had the most profound experience, and will never be the same.
You were in Peru. Did you do it in Peru or in
No,
the States?
I didn't. I did it in North America. If you're doing this, find the right guide, right?
I know.
Find
I heard
the person.
about that,
Yeah, it's very important to find people that know how to do this. This is not something to be approached lightly. And also, it's something that I think, we were talking about climate change, and I think this is part of the answer is healing, big healing for us as humans and us related to each other. Okay, so very, very long story short, I drank the medicine, and the experience I had was this being, and the Peruvians consider ayahuasca a spirit, a goddess spirit of the earth. And, at this point, I'm incredibly estranged from my mom. I'm not thinking about it. And this spirit comes to me in the experience I'm having. And she says, your mother is beautiful. And I just like, oh, right? So painful. And I sat there and the spirit said, I'm going to sit here with you till you say it. And eventually I was like, my mother is beautiful. And then she said, she's been waiting 45 years to hear you say that. And then this spirit said to me, like a lot of things happened. It was really hard for your mom. And you've been very ungrateful because like despite all of that, she gave birth to you, and she did that with blood and pain. And you have been ungrateful about that gift. I was like, wow, okay. And she said, I want you to have some experience of what that was like for her. And so then I spent about 5 hours on my hands and knees, feeling like I was my mom giving birth to me.
Oh. Oh, wow.
Which is, this rebirthing is somewhat a common experience in ayahuasca. There are many different threads, but this is one. And, it was intense and incredibly painful. And I felt my hips spread, and I got my period that night, and it was just so intense, and I really felt it. I'm like, oh, this is what she gave me. And at the end of it, the spirit said, okay, so all these things happened, but this is what she did for you, and she was your portal into this world. And then she said, you have to go and talk to her and ask her to tell you the story of your birth. And at that point, I said, yes, absolutely, anything. So when I got out of the ceremony, which also contained many, many other threads, but this is the big one, because I consider my mother wound the biggest wound of my life. When I got out, I told people I'm doing this, and everyone in my life was like, wow, this is crazy. This is, your relationship has been so bad. And I said, no, I'm doing this. And I texted her and said, I want to meet with you. I want you to tell me the story of my birth. And she said, yes. And I said, where do you want to meet? And she said, Starbucks.
Okay. Back to reality.
Yeah.
Okay.
Back to reality. Yeah. So we go to Starbucks and we held hands, and for about 3 hours we cried, and she just told me everything that had happened to her. Just so hard and scary. She was so young and she didn't know anything. And she didn't, I don't think, really even know how her body was going to do this, because there's so much secrecy around it, and I just really understood. I got that piece. And now when I think back, it was like so brilliant, because that's the place where we could connect, right? Like that moment, that day, without any of the overlay of anything else. And it just was the second step to so much healing, so much healing. And now 5 years later, we're in a really different place. We're not incredibly close, but we're 100% closer than we were. I invited her about a month ago to come and visit me for one night, and she came, and it's the first time we have been under the same roof in maybe 14, 15 years, and it was really sweet, and I'm like, oh, I get it. Like, she has had a really hard life. There's so many things. And yeah, she was reacting to patriarchy and immigration, racism, right? Coming to America, not knowing anything. And not knowing anybody, not, the stress of what it means to make yourself. It's like going to a different planet. I can't express. Yeah.
Even from Europe to America is like going to a different planet.
From Europe to America is a different planet. So like South Asia to America. And at that point in the 80s, you couldn't like just call people or Skype them. Once you left, you were gone. So I've just really understood. It's not hunky-dory. I don't want people to be like, I'm not being like kumbaya, like it's, I have a lot of boundaries. I am very protected with myself. And yeah, it's really nice. The other part of this is about 2 years ago, she separated from my dad. And
for real this time?
Yeah, for real.
And how did that work out?
It was astonishing, because at first my sister and I were like, there's no way, right? Like this will, in a couple of months, this will undo. And it hasn't. It hasn't undone. She is 100% happier. And here's the kicker, so is he.
Oh, fantastic.
He wasn't in the beginning. He was very upset. But then over time, now I think he's incredibly happy. He just went to Sri Lanka and had the best time of his life. And, they were just not, I guess I can't say they weren't supposed to be together, because that would mean like I don't exist, right? And for a long time I thought that. And I actually felt like I shouldn't exist. I carried a lot of like, my parents are so unhappy and they were forced to be together. I should not exist. And now I don't have that. I'm like, I exist and I do my work and I love as much as I can. And I'm here. And my mom has really gone through such a journey, such a change. It's like being with a different person. A big thing that happened to her is at some point she became friends with a Buddhist nun. And I think that relationship and that friendship has been just so good and nurturing, and came at a time in her life when she was really at the breaking point, and that friendship and seeing a woman living in a nunnery by herself and being happy and, doing meditation and being in the spiritual life has just been transformative. And my mom feels different.
Is she meditating now? Does she have a spiritual practice?
Yeah, she does. She meditates. She just feels more settled, right? That rage is gone. The sort of crackly. Yeah, it's really shocking. And for many years I was like, okay, I'm on guard. This can't be right, Which is why I'm so glad you contacted me, because I've been wanting to do an update to the essay. And I haven't gotten around to writing the sort of update. So this is like the first time I'm doing a sort of update.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And we're in a really, really different place. Like she just, when you're around people, you can feel, right? Like how they are. And she just feels good. And they were married for 50 years and it was a very bad, painful marriage for 50 years. And now she's like, I'm happier than I've ever been.
You know how often I hear this and how much I love these stories. And my mother had a similar one. My mom, in her last interview that she did in her 60s, she said, I've never been this happy. And you could see that she really meant it. And I hear that in so many interviews when women get divorced in their 60s and start a new life and they are happier than ever. And it's one of the most beautiful takeaways until now from this 100-something interviews that, it's never too late.
Yeah.
It's never too late.
It's never too late,
No, that's beautiful.
Yeah, because the lie is that marriage is going to make us fulfilled, right?
Yeah.
In this,
absolutely, and forever. Maybe it makes you fulfilled for some time, but maybe it serves its time. Maybe it's not forever.
Maybe it's not forever. I mean, as young girls, we're just like so programmed and so told that you have to find a man, you have to find a man, you have to be with a man, you have to, and then there's so much pressure, and you just don't really think about how to develop yourself.
Yeah.
And then these women that we're talking about get to like their 60s and 70s and are like, wow, I can do a whole thing by myself. And it's just beautiful to see.
It's beautiful.
Lovely.
Yes.
Oh. I'm so glad you told me that this is like a common story.
It is. It's fantastic. It's really beautiful. These women in their 50s, 60s, starting new businesses, taking businesses over from their, if they lost their husbands, they take over businesses and run them successfully or get divorced. It's beautiful, beautiful stories about this second or even third lives that are so happy and fulfilled and fantastic, really fantastic. I think we already started talking about lessons.
Oh my gosh, I think so, right?
Yes.
Yeah, I think they're all folded in there.
Yes, they are. Do you want to bring them up to the surface for us?
Oh, yeah. Gosh, okay, lessons. I don't think I could have gotten this earlier because it was so painful, right? And I don't think it was right for me to get it, but just listening to someone's story and being able to hear it. And I couldn't have heard it before because my experience was very loud, and I would have been very angry if someone tried to tell me, like, listen to her. Well, fuck that, right? Like, I'm over here trying to survive this childhood. It sucks. I can't listen to her. But later, when I was an adult, and I'm so fucking lucky because I could do this before she passed.
Yes.
So just listening to her story, like being like, okay, let me be here and listen to what happened to her. And hopefully she can listen to mine. She's actually been very open. I'm still guarded, but some of my guard is dropping slowly. So that's one, like, what did our mothers go through? Can we hear them? That's a big one. And she's resilient. She's very resilient.
You see, this is the second thing that I always hear.
Really?
And I still don't know what to make of it. Almost every interview I hear this. My mother is resilient, and I learn resilience from her. And it's beautiful that we see our mothers that way. And I think when we become mothers, we're not aware of it, that, we are resilient. I think we should be more, I think women should be more aware of their resilience and strength.
Absolutely. We live in patriarchy, right? Which is telling us that we need to look a certain way or behave a certain way or wear a certain thing. And there's so much more strength than that. There's like deep bodily strength, deep wisdom, connection to the earth, like all of these other wisdoms that we have. Yeah. Inter sort of generational wisdom, right?
Nurturing, connecting. I think women are fantastic in just interlacing things.
What I'm hearing from women now is we get to keep this blood for ourselves, right? It's no longer about giving it to the baby or like nurturing someone else. Like, okay, now I get to keep this for myself. And what do I create with that? And can we be beautiful and sexy and creative and resilient through that change too, right? Because honestly, this entire culture is pushing down on us and trying to make us not. And I think the sort of the big answer to that is women talking to each other, women talking across generations, right? Breaking silence.
And across the world.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Across the world. Across the world. It is really important for women to talk to women of other races. You know, like our story is not all the same, right?
And other experiences, other cultures, other mother wounds, as we just talked about. It's like, you know, you carry this arranged marriage history, which I, for instance, don't. But it's so important we exchange these experiences and open each other's eyes.
Yeah, like what is the generational wounding, right? And I think for South Asians, and I'm speaking so broadly here, and I, you know, like I might offend many South Asians when I say this. My opinion is our generational wound is arranged marriage.
Are they still happening?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, God.
Oh, yes. Oh, completely.
Still at that young age?
I mean, you know, no, not as young, as young, right? My grandma was 12, my mom was 19, and now folks, it might be like 25, 29, but there's an incredible amount of pressure. Now, again, we're talking about there are differences in caste and class and education and where somebody is in the world. And often, you know, there's a narrative like it's gotten better. I don't know. In a certain way, it might have actually gotten worse. I think patriarchy in South Asia is actually stronger now. Places, I mean, in America too, right? We just are having this huge fight about abortion rights. So the patriarchy is strong. Yeah, unbelievable. It's unbelievable. So this is all the kind of work we have to do. And okay, so I've gone so far off.
No, we did. I just wanted to bring it back. I'm like, let's go back to Mama's lesson.
Mama's lessons, right. And you know, this is the big lesson. One quick thing, and it's very important. My mom is so fucking good with money. And this is something I really respect and would like to learn more about, I think. I'm not great at it, but there's a real practical sense about her that I would love to learn more about how to sort of channel that. And I think it's coming from that mother wound where I was like, I'm not going to be like her, right? So I've rejected some of her gifts. And I need to learn how to accept some of the gifts. And then the big thing I just also want to say is, my mom is my mother, and she was like my portal here. And also, we all have a much bigger mother, which is the planet, right? My mom is one small human woman who was trying her best and, you know, didn't do it well and is now doing it so much better and is trying and is a great grandma. And also, she is a daughter, and we're all sort of daughters and sons of this planet. And I think that is like a really big thing to keep in mind is like this planet, I feel, is our mother. And it's such a cliche. It's so incredibly true, right? It's such a ridiculous, silly cliche. And no, but really, right?
I'll tell you a secret. I just recorded, I was playing with the idea for a long time. And instead of a holiday special episode, I decided to give my listeners as a present a guided meditation. A thank you, Mama guided meditation. And this is what I do. I take them away up into the universe and help them to look at the planet and look at the universe. I think universe is also our mother. And to appreciate planet Earth and say thank you to Mother Earth and thank you to the universe for everything, for being. So I'm very glad you just mentioned this.
I love that. That's exactly right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're just little humans. My mom's just a human. But there are like much, much bigger forces. And having, you know, when you said thank you, Mama, I'm like, oh yeah, thank you, like you said, to these much bigger things. Oh, that's everything. Oh my God, I'm so glad you said that. That was gorgeous.
Yeah. Naomi, do we have more lessons, or do you feel like...
No, I feel very complete.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Let me just quickly recap. I have... I love these lessons, listening to someone's story. And in this case, we were talking about listening to our mother's stories. And I love it how you mentioned that we have to be ready for that. Of course, when you're young, you're too busy healing yourself to open yourself for that. But it's so healing if we listen to each other. And this is a beautiful circle back to the beginning of our conversation, where we talked about exactly that, empathy and opening ourselves to the others and unifying instead of dividing. Resilience. And then I think something you wish you've learned was her practical and talented way of dealing with money. And then we just talked about the planet Earth, which is our big mother, and how we should be grateful to her and put our forces together and rescue her. How beautifully we came back to the beginning of our conversation. What a beautiful circle, huh?
So good. So wonderful. I love this. Thank you so much. Like I said, I haven't really put it all together in this way, like step 1, the childhood, step 2, the writing of the essay, which was very hard, step 3, the ayahuasca experience. I'm sure there will be other steps, there will be death, one of us will go through the death of the other, so that will be a different kind of portal. But it's really nice to talk it through and be like, this is the journey. Because what is bigger than the mother wound? That's my biggest wound, I believe. As I'm talking, I'm having that image of the, Japanese art where when they crack a dish, they fix it with gold. So I'm thinking about the mother wound as this thing that, when it cracks, like you can fix it with gold and there's something, I'm mixing all the metaphors, but that's okay, I guess. When your heart cracks, right, you actually want it to crack because that's how the light gets in, and you kind of want to walk around, I think, with a broken heart because then it lets it in, this sort of permeability or... okay.
I experienced that when I lost my mom. I still don't. I tried writing about it, and I still have a hard time putting it into words.
Some of the work that I do is helping people write about these things. So if folks want to contact me, I'm a very good midwife to books.
And they can see, I will put a link to your website in the notes, so anybody who's interested can find you. And you have these beautiful online courses and Zoom things, so you can people can reach out to you and get some help.
I have a wonderful, wonderful Saturday writing class for women on Zoom, and it's amazing. And I invite folks, if they're interested, to contact me.
Okay.
Great. So good.
Naomi, thank you again for being here and sharing all of this.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. Really my pleasure.
Thank you. If you enjoy Thank You Mama and want to help it grow, please take the 2 seconds to leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. It really helps. If you'd like to get in touch, you can send me a mail at info@thankyumama.net. You can also find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter under Anna Teider. That's Tajder. This was Thank You Mama. Come back next week, subscribe, and tell your friends.